Hi, I'm Boogie Panda. This is the first of a series of YouTube videos that will talk about what developing for IMVU is like. This first video is about how you unwrap a mesh for texturing. In the future I plan on doing other videos that talk about how you mesh, how you animate, how you do all kinds of things for IMVU, but today we're just going to talk about how to unwrap an existing mesh. I happen to use the old-fashioned method for unwrapping meshes. If you have 3D Studio Max 8 or later, there are probably a lot more efficient ways to do this, but this is how I do it. This is 3D Studio Max. It's the program that most developers use to generate 3D meshes for IMVU. This is a mesh I made several months ago and hadn't gotten around to unwrapping yet. To start the process, you need to make sure that all the faces in your mesh are selected and use the drop-down modifier menu to select Unwrap UVW. In this panel, if you click Edit, the Edit UVW window will appear. This window gives you a two-dimensional view of your three-dimensional object. I happen to prefer using the flatten mapping method. In the mapping menu, choose Flatten Mapping. This will take groups of faces in your mesh that are reasonably flat and lay them out for you. Usually these groupings will be too small to be useful, so what you will have to do is to stitch them together. In order to apply a texture to this mesh, you have to unwrap it. This is sort of like peeling an orange. You take a three-dimensional object and break it into pieces so that you can flatten it. To stitch something, you need to select two or more vertices in your mesh, right-click, and choose Stitch Selected. This will stitch the two vertices to anything else in the mesh that matches. And once you've done a nice texture map, you should be able to apply a texture to your mesh in Previewer without a lot of deformation. When you select one vertex, you may notice other vertices turn blue. This means they're connected. If you select two vertices and hit Ctrl W, that will weld them together. They have to be reasonably close together, however. If two vertices are not close enough together, they won't weld and you'll have to drag them closer. This can be useful for vertices that do not stitch together automatically. Continue the process of stitching and welding to get your mesh to come together. There are many ways to unwrap a mesh. Newer versions of Max have more sophisticated tools, and there are also third-party plugins you can get. This is how I unwrap meshes in 3D Studio Max 7 without any additional tools. You also may occasionally notice stray faces like this. In this particular case I have no clue where this belongs, so I'm going to pull it off for the time being. You can pull pieces of your mesh out by selecting it and hitting Ctrl B. This will break it apart from the rest of the mesh. I'll use that to pull this aside for now and figure out what to do with it later. Hey dear.
You're talking to yourself.
I'm recording video, dear. You're interrupting.
Whatever.
Whatever. If you happen to make a mistake, you can always break things apart. You can select a face, hit Ctrl B, or right-click and choose Break, and that will allow you to pull that face away from the rest of the mesh. You can also select a vertex of your mesh, hit Ctrl B, or right-click and choose Break, and that will unwield the points. Remember, you don't want to connect everything. You only want to connect pieces of your mesh that can be reasonably flattened. Continue stitching your mesh together until you have a reasonably large flat surface. Remember, you don't want to weld things that don't connect, like this. In this case, these two go together, and now I can see that there's a face missing, so I stitch it in. That looks much better. Keep stitching things together until you have nice flat groups. Then, use Control Print Screen to get a shot of your texture map and cut paste that into your paint program.